Plastic, clay, unglazed, glazed. Let's figure out which pot fits best for your bonsai tree. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna dive into the topic of bonsai pots and when to use which pot and which pot fits best to your tree. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to never miss out on any of my bonsai tips and tricks in the future. So choosing the right pot for your bonsai is critical for its health and well-being in the long term. So let's explore all the different factors that go into your decision and also when it is the right time to change pots for your trees. So first, let's start talking about materials for pots. The probably most common and most traditional ones are clay pots. Clay pots are porous, so they provide perfect aeration for your trees, so they very well go together with good draining soil. You can find those clay pots either in a glazed form or an unglazed form. The glazed pots normally hold the moisture a bit better than unglazed pots, and most often for indoor trees, for example, you would use a glazed pot, while for outdoor trees you normally go for the unglazed versions. Another big bracket of pots is plastic pots, and they have become more and more common in the last couple of years. There is certain reasons for that. They are quite inexpensive. They do hold the moisture better than, for example, clay pots. So especially for species that need more consistent watering, a plastic pot might actually be the better choice then, because it allows you to space the watering a bit further apart in between, because the moisture is simply held better in those pots. So that already shows you need to really always look at the specific needs of your tree when choosing the pot. So if I look at a Portulacaria afro, for example, which I have in my collection, I would go for a clay pot because it is normally on the drier side, so I do not want to risk it being overwatered by having it maybe in a plastic pot where the water is simply retained way longer than in a clay pot. The same goes for many ficus varieties in my opinion also. However, for example, I have a Chinese privet or a Sarissa tree where I'm pretty much considering at the moment to put them into plastic pots, because there I have the other problem that sometimes the soil dries out a bit too fast for my liking, and I would like them to retain the water a little bit better. Apart from clay and plastic pots, of course, you have still smaller brackets of pot varieties. You can find them made out of concrete, for example, of course, with still drainage holes in the bottom. You can find wooden boxes that are turned into bonsai pots. And you can find simply different materials, different plastics, different clays, also of course not only natural clays, but also synthetic clays. So there's also always the chance to experiment with different materials and simply see what fits best for your tree. Of course, it can all even go down to rock or just a piece of slate basically where you drape your tree on. So just in my opinion, experiment with different pots, see what fits best to your aesthetics that you try to achieve with your trees, but also to the health and the needs of the trees. And when you combine those two things, you will definitely get the best result out of it. Apart from the material, the size also plays an important role when it comes to bonsai pots. So the size must fit to the tree. If you put a small tree into a too big pot, first of all, it goes a bit against the idea of bonsai, which means you confine this tree in a small pot, which also stunts its growth, so it stays a miniature tree. If you put it into a too big pot, you at first risk that this tree will simply grow and lose its shape way faster than in a smaller pot. But of course, also normally the root mass of your tree does not fill out this entire pot. So you will have areas in there where you only have soils, no root system, which could then again lead to this part of the soil mat staying moist for too long, maybe root rot then starting to develop. So it can definitely harm the health of your tree also if the size of the pot doesn't fit to the size of the tree. So basically look at the development of your tree, in which stage it is. Is it a very young tree? Is it an old established tree with a very nice root mass also? And then simply fit the bonsai pot in accordance to the development of your tree. But what about seasons? Do we need to change something there when it comes to pots? Seasons do play a factor when it comes, of course, to repotting your tree. Most trees do have a certain time when they are supposed to be repotted, because otherwise you can damage or even potentially kill your tree. So when are normally the times when you should repot your tree? Usually, and for most species, this is late winter to early spring, so just before the growth season starts, before the tree is basically getting ready to start producing a lot of new foliage. For evergreen trees, this can be different, because there you rather look at early spring again, but also late summer. As they do not lose their leaves, they will still continue producing energy over the cold season, so there's not that much risk of the repotting harming it, even if you do it in late summer. What I would not advise is to do it really in the middle of summer when it simply is too hot, because it can simply be that the roots will get affected too much. This heat shock with the shock of repotting might be too much for your tree. So basically rather opt for spring or late summer then when it comes to evergreen trees. And otherwise late winter, early spring. But how do we actually know that our tree does need to be repotted? Usual signs that it is time for your tree to be repotted are that the growth might be stunted or starting to become stunted, that when you water your tree it drains extremely fast, and that when you would put it out of the pot, you can see the roots really circling around the tree. That is really the telltale sign that you do need to change the pot of your tree. But when we talk about bonsai pot, of course, an important thing is how do we match the look of the pot to the overall shape of the tree. And that is really something you should put some thought into, because it will definitely affect the overall aesthetics of your tree. So what you want to do is really complement the overall shape of your tree, but not take away from it. So the focus should be the tree, but the pot should complement this focus. So of course there's very specific pots, for example for cascading trees, which you have simply taller and slimmer pots that simply heighten this look of a cascading tree by giving it simply this additional height on which the tree can flow over the pot basically. So that is a good example of how the pot really complements the overall aesthetic of the tree and the intended aesthetic of your tree. Most upright trees actually look better in rectangular and more traditional pots, because you have this very strict upright look and shape of your tree, and that very much fits to also like a quite hard edges rectangular shape of your pot. Then trees that normally have a more compact root system, like for example conifers, they might look better in round or oval shaped trees, because it simply again tidies up the already quite compact root system. Also again, of course, stopping the tree from being affected by maybe a too large pot where parts cannot be filled out by roots. And it again overall looks very nice when it comes to simply the oval shape of your conifer tree. In general, what you should do is observe the natural look of your tree and simply for yourself decide what, in your opinion, fits best to it. Because in the end, it is your tree, it is your aesthetic that you're trying to achieve with that tree, and simply go with your gut is, in my opinion, always the best way to decide which pot to choose. And definitely really take the time when you repot and try different pots. Really take the uprooted tree and place it in different pots and see how it would look like in those pots. And then simply choose the one that you find the best. So to sum up, when we look at bonsai, the pot is an integral part of the overall aesthetic of your tree. So do take the time to really look into which pot you choose for your tree, and if this pot on the one hand fits to the aesthetics, but also fits to the overall needs of the tree and will provide the groundwork basically for your tree to be healthy and happy in this pot for quite some years actually, until the next repot is needed. So if you have any questions about the pots that you choose for your trees or bonsai in general, feel free to leave them in the comments. I will answer them as soon as I see them. Hopefully I will see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.